The night's grown old, and the party weary. It's time to take that long rest. No place left to do it than in the middle of the woods. Every player needs this, but slightly fears this, because they know that every DM patiently waits for this when the party relaxes and settles in and is completely caught off guard by that ambush. But if you're going to have that ambush, set the scene with some amazing terrain. But where are we going to get terrain for this? I knows! The woods. For this build, I'm on a quest to see how cheap I can build it. I don't want to buy a lot of supplies. So I hit up my backyard, grabbed a bunch of sticks that looked pretty cool, grabbed a bunch of rocks that I thought would fit the environment, threw them into my oven, 20 minutes at 250, sterilizes everything, any bugs that are on it, kills them, wipes them out. Now the first thing that I want to build here is rock piles. You can just throw some of these rocks down and really get a good scatter terrain built up, but to take it to the next level, I'm going to take a little bit of drywall filler, actually a lot of it right there, and that kind of turns to be mistake number one. I should have kept that down to a far minimum, but I fill in all the gaps with it, kind of try to create a bond, and for the most part this does actually work pretty well. Took a little bit longer than I expected to dry, and in the end I reinforced it with some super glue because it just didn't hold up quite the way that I thought it would. But to get it going, a good base, and again, fill in the gaps, this worked out pretty good for that purpose. I'm going to make 2 piles of these. Minis can stand somewhat on them, but more so this is for blocking line of sight, for hiding, and really adding to the atmosphere that you're doing. I'm going to take some flock while all that's still wet, and I'm just going to kind of pack it in there. Aim for all the white spots. I want all those to be completely covered. I'm not going to really be using much paint on this project. Flocking and tufts, that's really the main thing that I'm using on a lot of this. All those tufts, I'm not going to stick them on the surface. I'm going to wedge them down between the rocks. You're not going to see them all that much, but having the little bits pop up here and there, that's what's really going to sell this. Any large pile, cracks of rocks, you're going to see debris growing out of them in time. Here, these are the 2 most interesting pieces of wood that I had found on the yard. I broke them down to a reasonable size, removed all the bark and the bits that were going to come off. And here what I'm trying to do is create a flat base. And I'm using the same drywall filler. Just kind of gooping it up on here. Again, I made this big mistake of just using too much of it. I tried to create the big base, and the majority of this just broke right off when I was done. I think I would have been far better off taking some cardboard, chipboard, MDF, something similar to that, and making just a little bit of a flat base. So now the next part here is I wanted to put the tufts down first because I wanted them to blend in a little bit more. I'm going to glue some of them into the cracks. You can see where the wood is kind of broken apart. Yeah, I really want to have just this like dead, overgrown look to these sets of logs. The next part that I'm going to tackle here is I'm going to bring one of my favorite basing materials into this, and that's just all-purpose construction sand. It's got a really good mix of different aggregates into it, and I'm going to pour it on to all those still very much so wet pieces of drywall filler. This worked out pretty okay. It could have gone a little bit better, but again, for what it was, it worked. You can already see it's kind of coming apart here. Probably some smarter ways that you could have done this. Moving on to the next step though, I'm going to get some just regular old PVA, Elmer's school glue, whatever you guys want to use, and I'm just going to hit random spots around the tree. And then I'm going to come in with the flocking. Now, what I don't really show on camera is that I went back after the fact. There were a lot of white spots still left over from the drywall filler, and I flocked over top of those, and I had glued the rocks back together a little bit more. Now that we have the scatter covered, we're going to work on some tents. So I'm looking for a 70-degree angle. I'm sizing up to see how it looks with the D&D mini. At the same time, I like dual purpose, so if I want to use it on an Age of Sigmar board, I don't want it to look too small and kind of derpy. Check it out to length, break it off, get a whole pile to make your tent. This is going to be more of a TP style, so I'm just going to put on a slip knot, and I'm going to try to create the triangular base. This was increasingly difficult to try to do on film. To do it in this small area underneath the camera, I couldn't get it done. It actually took me quite a while to get this. If anybody knows a trick or how they actually do tie up teepees, throw a link or a description or something that you know in the comments down below, because I really could use it if I try to use this project again. After I tied it off, the inside was a little bit unsupported, so I just took a very small rock, wedged it up in there, threw in some super glue, cinched that up there pretty quick. Now that I've got the base of this tent TP all set up, I'm going to take some torn up pieces of paper towel. You can use a plethora of different things. You can use toilet paper, you could use maybe something like craft paper, but for here I'm going to super glue it onto the sticks themselves, create a base at the top of it, wrap it up like a nice cozy towel after you get out of the shower, firm it up, kind of create that door going into it, and give the last little bits of glue support going across it. Now that that's ready, I've just got a mixture of water, PVA glue, and a little bit of a real dark, heavy black. Now I'm going to coat the entire thing with this. This soaks through, so there's no need to do the inside of it. It's going to get pretty good coverage, and when it's all dried, it's going to give it that little bit of extra strength that it needs to stiffen up and hold throughout use. Now the paint job on this is going to be really simple. Again, I didn't want to use a whole lot of paints on this project. I wanted to keep it as bare minimum as possible. So I just grabbed this like medium brown, one that I thought would kind of mimic leather pretty decently. And then I did a 50-50 mix with a real light tan earth. And then I went on top and I did a final just dry brush of pure tan earth. Here I grabbed all those folds that stick up, hit some of the accents, a lot of texture from the paper towel. And in this aspect, I think it helped out. Now the fire, I didn't film any good footage of it up until this point. The base of it was very simple. It's the same as the rocks, except I didn't use the drywall filler. Seeing how it worked last time, I just used super glue. Instead of rocks, I used some IKEA like broken glass bits that I had from a project a very long time ago. It was reasonably cheap. They were already black, so they had the charcoal looking feel to it. Just as easily, you can just grab some small rocks from the yard and do the same thing. As for the wood, that is just broken up and cut into little tiny strips of the same wood that I used on the tent and teepee itself. And then, of course, a ripped up cotton ball for the flame. Last part is just to give it that basic paint job for any flame, a yellow underneath, and work its way up through the orange, and then dry brush of a red at the tip. At that point, we've got that just about finished. So in cleaning out my basement, I found this really cool old terrain board that I used to use to mess around with Dungeons & Dragons. I didn't actually play it that much at this time, but I just thought it was really cool to have, and I messed around with, and it had a lot of the same tokens I wanted to do for this map. So I just walk around, placed them down, swapped them out. The 2D effect works great, but this is just an example of how that 3D effect from something very simple, very quick, a weekend project, just elevates the whole game experience of that extremely quick. There we've got our little merchant traveler for scale. And that's blam.
An entire campsite.
For scattered terrain, the tent, the campfire, you got the basics to really get going with very small to no cost associated with it. All the materials I used, I've just had an abundance of at home. You can get the majority of these pretty cheap. And honestly, you could go without using a lot of them. Just a little bit of glue, and you can make do. These type of encounters I have found to be some of the most fun, entertaining, and they really kind of rally the party back up together. It's not really a big threat, but seeing this environment to it just brings the whole thing. It really keeps the immersion going inside of the campaigns. So if you have any basic camp sets or even advanced camp sets that you like to use, throw them down in the comments. I like to see what everybody else is using for these. If you have ideas and something that you want to try in the future, but you're not really too sure how to get it going, throw it down in the comments below. I'm going to keep building on this, kind of do the next scene, maybe like an ambush on the road or a planned attack on a mountain, and slowly build up more and more terrain for it. I think that'll be a pretty cool series to build up. So until next time, abuchnanas. Oh, and if I haven't mentioned, follow me on the social medias. TikTok at abuchnanas_Nomio Dilbo, and Instagram, abuchnanas_tabletop.